For our next Bootstrap demo, we're going to take a look at some of the components that come with Bootstrap. First, we're going to jump over to the Bootstrap website and we're going to do a quick overview of some of the Bootstrap components. You're going to find in your day-to-day development of Bootstrap that Bootstrap is so large and such a capable library, it's impossible to memorize all of the various CSS style classes and other components of the framework. So having the Bootstrap website opened up on your local PC as you're writing code will become a daily part of your MVC 5.0 life. Then we're going to take a look at the panels component. That's one of the most popular components that you'll use over and over again in your application. And then we're going to do a demonstration of the alert component and take a look at that and understand how to create really cool looking alert boxes. For this Bootstrap demo, we're going to take a little bit closer look at some of the excellent UI components that Bootstrap offers us to make use of in our web applications. To do that, let's first jump over to the Bootstrap website. I'm going to fire up Internet Explorer, get bootstrap.com, and we're going to click on the Components tab at the top. All right. Basically what this page is going to show us is a bunch of UI components that the Bootstrap developers have created for us to use in our applications. Now if we look over here down here at the side menu, you can see a bunch of different things. Here we have everything from glyphicons to drop-downs, button groups, button drop-downs, input groups, so on and so forth. One really cool feature of the Bootstrap UI components are these glyphicons. You can actually use these little icons on the various components that are in Bootstrap, and we'll take a look at that later for the alert box that we're going to take a look at. So if we continue to scroll down here, you'll see we have breadcrumbs and pagination. For example, the Jumbotron that we saw on the home page of our default web application for MVC 5.0. There's also the nav bars. So if we remember the navs that we saw at the top of the page, these are these, where you have different navigations. And all of this is created for you as part of Bootstrap. Now on the Bootstrap UI components page, you're going to notice that in addition to the examples, it actually has the source code that you can take a look at and use this source code to help you build these components in your MVC application. Now like we said before, Bootstrap is not MVC 5 only. It's used on many other platforms. It's purely a client-side framework, and here are the examples of how you can implement this client-side CSS framework within your application. So as we scroll down now, I want to take a look at two particular components that are fairly commonly used in our applications. The first one that we're going to look at are the panels. So if we come over here, we're going to kind of see a basic example of how a panel is used. We have a div tag with a class of class panel, panel-default, and inside of it we have a panel body, and this is a basic panel example. You'll notice here in the example it's this basic panel example text surrounded by a box with rounded corners. There's also an option to have a panel with a heading. So if you look here, here's the HTML to create this panel. Here are the classes, so once again the panel and panel default classes. But now we're going to add another class called panel heading. And in here you can place whatever text you want, and then it will appear in the heading like so. There's also a panel title class which provides a little bit more formatting. It makes the font a little bit bigger, and you can actually have a panel title that stands apart from the panel content. And you can also have a panel with a footer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new Visual Studio project, and we're actually going to go in there and we're going to create our own panel, and we're going to see how this works in Visual Studio. So we jump back to Visual Studio, we go to File, New, Project. We're going to select our ASP.NET web application. We'll just leave the default name that's listed there. We're going to go ahead and make sure that we click on MVC. We're going to change our authentication to no authentication. Make sure MVC is selected there. We don't need any unit tests, and we're not going to host it in the cloud. We're going to click OK. As part of our best practices, we're just going to rebuild this real quick, make sure that everything builds properly, and that it runs. So great, we know our ASP.NET MVC5 application is configured correctly. Now we're going to jump down into our views, and we are going to go to the Home Index view. And this time we're actually going to come in and we're going to delete all of this content. And then we're going to go over to our shared layout, and we're going to leave the HTML head and the start body tag and all that, but we're going to remove all of this content in here. So we have a nice clean page to work with. We'll take that out, we'll take this out, and we're going to take out this body content tag. We don't need that for our Bootstrap example here. So now we've updated our layout file, and we are going to go back to our index file. And just to make sure that everything loads up as we expect, we're going to type in no content. We're going to run this, and we should see no content. Now, we can tell this is actually running in the Bootstrap container because no content is not right next to the edge of the browser because it's kind of sitting out here in the middle of the page. We know that it's actually loaded into that Bootstrap container. So we're going to close our window, and we're going to come in here, and we're actually going to create our own panel. So we're going to type a div tag, class, and we're going to type in panel. And as you can see here, Visual Studio gives us some really nice IntelliSense for our Bootstrap CSS classes. So what I've typed in here is this. I've typed in the class name panel, but you'll notice, if you remember from the documentation, we saw panel-default. I'm actually going to use panel-primary, and I'm going to show you how it looks different. So I'm going to type in div, class, panel, body, and now I'm going to put in some panel content. So here is my panel content. Okay. Now if I come up here, I'm going to actually add a header to this. And I'm going to add another class for my panel title. And I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to run my web application. Now you'll notice it's blue. So I have my panel title, and there's my panel content. If I were to change this back to default like we saw on the web page, my panel now appears with a gray background. So that just shows you some of the things that you can do there with Bootstrap in terms of styling your panel and making it appear different colors, that kind of thing. So we're going to close that now. The next component that we're going to look at is the alert box. I find the alert boxes to be extremely useful when wanting to display alert messages to users whenever something interesting happens in an application. Could be an error, it could be something informational, maybe something successful. Here's an example of what they look like. So here we have, well done, and you have successfully read this important alert message. This is more of a success type of message. It's green. This blue message here is informational. It's something that somebody should read, but an error didn't occur. Next we have this warning message, which is yellow, and then of course an error message, which is red. So we can actually create these same alerts in our code. So we'll go back to Visual Studio now, and we will delete our panel. We'll add a new div tag with a class of alert. And then we'll do informational. So we'll do info. Here is some information. Save it, run it. And now we have a blue information box. Now let's say I wanted to actually display the red box. I could use the danger and then run it. And now I have a nice red box. See how easy that is with Bootstrap? Someone having to write all their own CSS to display a simple alert box would take a lot more time than what we just did to have a nice, attractive, good-looking box appear. What's really cool is Bootstrap will do one more thing for you in terms of this application, in terms of using alert boxes. We can actually come in here and we can actually set this thing up so that we can display the alert and then allow the user to actually turn it off, to actually make it hide and go away. So what we do is we have to add this class called alert dismissible, okay? And then inside of this, we actually want to put a button. And it's going to be of type button because we don't want to submit a form. And the class will be close. And then we're going to use this data dismiss attribute called alert. Then we'll add a span tag, and we'll give it a class of SR only. Type in the word close. And then for fun, we'll add a strong on this. And we'll say first name is required. We don't have a first name field, but we've got to put some type of message in there, so we'll make first name required. Now, if we run this, we're supposed to get a little icon up here in the corner, but we did not get that little icon. So we will close this, and that's because we left out one small part of this. We actually need to add another span tag. And then add in a times, and this will actually display our little icon up there for us to be able to close our window. And now we can come up here and click our little X, and our alert box goes away. Our next Bootstrap demo is going to take a look at some of the components which make use of JavaScript and specifically the jQuery and jQuery plugins. We're going to go to the website and do a quick overview of the Bootstrap JavaScript components. Then we're going to take a look at creating a modal window component, as well as demonstrate the tabs component. In this Bootstrap demo, we're going to take a look at the Bootstrap UI components that actually make use of JavaScript. They actually make use of jQuery plugins and provide some really interesting dynamic functionality for end users making use of your application. So to get started with this, let's actually jump over to the Bootstrap website, and we'll take a look at this content on the Bootstrap website to see what type of JavaScript components are available to us. If we look here at the top of the menu, we see that we have this JavaScript link. We click on that, and that's going to take us to all of the JavaScript Bootstrap components. Come down here, if we look over at the side menu, we're going to see that we have a lot of different options: transitions, modal, drop down, scroll spy, tab, tooltips, popovers, some dynamic stuff with the alerts, buttons, collapse, carousel, and a fix. The ones that I use most often are the modal pop-up. If if I scroll down here, you'll see where basically it creates a modal window. There's a nice little demo on here that you can make use of. You can actually click this and launch demo modal. And look at that. You have a modal window appears in your web browser. Now this is all done by Bootstrap. We can come up here and click the little X, and now the modal window disappears. Below this button, you're going to see a bunch of sample code which shows you how to build one of these modal pop-ups in your web application. Another popular UI component that uses JavaScript are the tabs. So we have the home, we have the profile tab, you can do drop-downs, you can do a lot of sophisticated UI stuff very, very easily in Bootstrap. I like the popover too. I've used the popover for a number of things, for like searching and that kind of thing, to give back, like, there are no search results or 10 results were found. I'll have it be a popover next to my search text box. And to kind of give you an example, you can do click to toggle popover. And now you've got additional information. You can have these things pop up on the left, on top, on bottom, on the right. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of customization that's possible with Bootstrap. A personal favorite is also the carousel. So if you want to have a web page with a carousel on it, you've got one right here in Bootstrap. And like I said, Bootstrap comes with MVC 5. It's bundled with it automatically. So you have these rich UI components that are already available as part of your MVC 5 project setup. So the two that I specifically want to look at and do a short little demo on are the modal and the tab UI components. So we're going to jump back to Visual Studio, and we're going to create a new project. And it's going to be an ASP.NET Web Application project. We will leave the project name to be the default, and we will click OK. And we're going to be creating an MVC project, so we want to check the MVC template. We don't require any authentication for this project, so we're going to click No Authentication. And then down here, we're going to make sure that our MVC reference is checked. We don't need any unit tests, so we'll leave that unchecked. And we're not going to be hosting it in the cloud, so we'll leave that unchecked as well. And then we're going to click OK. And now Visual Studio is going to create our project for us. Excellent. As a best practice, we always like to compile our application to make sure that Visual Studio set it up correctly. Rebuild all succeeded. We'll run it quickly in Internet Explorer to make sure that everything's looking good. Excellent. Our project ran perfectly. So now we'll go ahead and close it, and we're actually going to remove some content from this website so that we can focus in on our modal window. So we're going to come down here to Views, and we're going to go to our Home view. We're going to go to the Index page. And we're actually going to delete all of this default content that the project wizard put in here for us. So it is now deleted, and we will save. We're then going to come to the shared folder and go to the layout file. And we are actually going to remove all of this content here. And we will remove our body content class. We don't require that. And then we will delete all of this. So now we have a very simple, basic page. And just to verify that all looks good, we'll run a no content page. Now we can tell that Bootstrap is loaded up because no content is not against the left side of the browser window. It's actually spaced out a little bit right at the beginning of the container class element. And so now we'll close our web browser window, and let's add ourselves a modal pop-up. So the first thing we need to do is we actually need a way to trigger our modal pop-up. And we'll do that with a simple button element. And so we're actually going to call the special button class for Bootstrap. And then we'll also add button primary. This will give us a really nice looking blue button. We'll also make it a large button. So now it's going to be a nice big blue button. And we're actually going to give it two data attributes. Data toggle, and we're going to set it equal to modal. and then data target, and we're going to set it equal to pound my modal. And then we're going to put in some text that says show modal window. So a little bit about what we've done here. This is going to tell Bootstrap, specifically jQuery, that when we click this button, we want to toggle the modal functionality. And the target refers to the div tag where the actual modal window is. So we want to toggle that window and make it either show or hide. So as you can see here, we have our show modal window text. So if we run this, we can click it. It doesn't do anything because we haven't actually added the modal window yet, but you can see the show modal text on top of the nice big blue button. So now we'll close that. Now we're actually going to add in our modal window. So we're going to do div class modal fade ID, which is my modal. This has to match the value that's up here at data target. Set our tab index to -1. We'll actually skip the role attribute. We don't need that for what we're doing for this example. Div class modal dialog. And then inside of our modal dialog, we need to actually add some modal content. Now the first part of our modal content is actually going to be a header. So we'll say class modal header. And now we need to add a button to display so that we can actually close our modal window. That's the little X button in the upper right hand corner. So button type button class close. This is actually going to be that special close looking button. Data dismiss. This is once again we're telling it we're dismissing a modal window. Okay. Then we need to add a span tag, and we will add our ampersand times. And then underneath that, we're going to actually add an H4 tag, not an H1, and give it a class, a modal title, and an ID of my modal label. And we'll call this my modal window. So that's our header. Now we're going to add a class for our modal body. Here is my modal content. And then finally, we will add our modal footer. And for this, we're just going to put a single button in here. Type button, class, button default. And once again, our data dismiss, it will close the modal window. And then the text for it will simply be close. So now we should have a completed modal window. Just clean up our HTML here a little bit. And we will save, and we will run. And provided all goes well, we should be able to click our button and have our modal window appear. And there's our modal window. Now, how easy was that? And that's what comes with MVC 5 paired with Bootstrap. Any developer can make use of this functionality in their code and really enhance their applications and deliver stuff that their clients, that their customer, that their boss will love. This is just, it's incredible how easy Bootstrap makes all of this. I can click close, and my modal window goes away. Now the next component that we want to take a look at is the actual tab strip. This is another popular one that you can make use of in your application. So let's jump back to Visual Studio. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and delete this content. And now we are actually going to go in there and we are going to build our very own tab list. All right, so in order to do this, the first thing we need is we actually need tabs. So let's go in there and create an unordered list. And we'll give it a class of nav and nav-tabs. Okay? And then we're going to add some list items to our tab list. So let's add home. Let's add one for about. Add one for contact. And we will add one for store. All right, so we add a little website here. We have a home page, we have an about page, we have a contact us page, and we actually have an online store that we want to display in our little tab list here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is what's going to be our default active tab when the page loads? Well, that's going to be the home list item. So we'll type in class, and we'll give it a class of active. So now when my page loads up, this is going to be the active default tab. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to make each of these, inside of the list item tag, I want to make it a link. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm actually going to type in ahref, type in home, and so now I'm going to copy and paste this down for each of my items. And we'll put a little closing A tag on there. And we're going to change that to about, contact, and store. Now the next thing I need to do is I actually need to add a data toggle attribute to this, and I'm going to call it tab. This is what's going to tell Bootstrap and jQuery that this is actually going to be a tab list. Come in here and paste it, paste, paste. So now each of those are going to be a tab. So now I can take this and I can run this, and I should have a tab list. Look at that. I can now click on different tabs, but a tab list is not complete if we don't actually have tab panes that actually contain our content and display those. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to add in our tab pane, or our tab panes. And the way we do that is we're going to add another div tag, and we're going to call it class tab-content. We're going to add another div tag in here, class tab pane. Now once again, the Visual Studio IntelliSense for CSS is amazing, and it's just giving us all these classes right at our fingertips. We're also going to specify active for this one, since the home tab is going to be our active tab. And then we'll do ID, and we will call this home. And then I'm going to just simply put in home tab content, and we have our closed div tag. Now this ID needs to match the ID up here in order for it to know which list item tab link pairs to which tab pane. So now we're just going to copy this, and we're going to change this to About, and change that to Contact, change that to Store, to About, Contact, and Store. And we will save that, and we will actually load this up in Internet Explorer. And now we should have a fully working tab pane. But actually, we don't. Look at that. We have all the tab content showing up. So let's see what we did wrong. All right, so we come back to our code here. We have class, tab content. That is correct. Ah, there's our mistake. When I copied and pasted, I left active on all the lines, so all of our tabs were active at the same time. Be very careful when you copy and paste code that you don't leave elements in there that shouldn't be in there. I'm sure every developer has done that on various projects. So we'll go back here to our page, we'll reload. Ah, now we have our one home tab content. Click About, click Contact, click Store, and we now have a fully working tab pane, compliments of Bootstrap. So as you can see, there's a lot of great JavaScript, Bootstrap UI components that you can make use of easily in your application to add some really, really great functionality. Bootstrap and the bundling of it with the MVC apps is really a great addition to the framework and to the developer experience, and allows developers to do some really, really neat things with their applications.